So if thought is energy and can become matter, it then indicates that there is a certain level of control you get through your thoughts. And since thoughts are the only things we can really prove exist, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of power is going to be in the thoughts. But that does mean that we have to be cautious of our thoughts and our emotions, given that we want positive emotions in our life and not negative necessarily. If you can only support creators who provide value and make you think, please consider contributing to my Patreon page the next time you watch one of my videos. Hello everybody and welcome. Today I had a little bit of a debate about whether I should do one type of video or another. I do plan on doing a muscle testing video, which I decided not to do today, but it was one of the contenders for what I should record. But instead, I kind of wanted to go a little bit into philosophy, and in particular a concept that Descartes came up with, which is the idea that I think, therefore I am. Now, from what I understand of Descartes, he kind of whittled down everything that he believed so that he could find absolute truth, and the only thing that he could really prove was that he thinks, and therefore he exists. And I kind of admire him in that regard, because that's actually something that I kind of did as well. I didn't go as far as he did, but I also know that he's not absolutely correct either, and this was something that was introduced to me a little while ago. I don't remember who said it, but it's essentially that you're not absolutely sure that it's you that's doing the thinking. All you know is that something is thinking, and it exists. Whether that's you or whether that's something else, we don't entirely know. But the point of this is essentially that the only thing we know for certain is that consciousness exists. And, who knows? Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe somebody else can whittle this out even further. But that's actually one of the main concepts I have for God, is consciousness, like an ultimate consciousness. Probably one that expands far beyond like individual humans. That's part of the reason why we are here on the earth, is to expand the consciousness, because life is growth. We all want to keep moving forward. So obviously, if you're talking about God, he would want the same, or she, or it, because, consciousness isn't exactly gender-based, but if God is, say, consciousness, then we are all like sectors of consciousness, and we have individual thought, but we also have access to higher knowledge. This is why when you meditate, you get bits of inspiration. This is where music comes from. It's not exactly something that you put together. Oftentimes the greatest musicians kind of receive their music. As an artist, I know that I almost never have an idea what I'm drawing beforehand. It usually just forms as I draw lines. That differs depending on what I'm drawing, but as I started out as an abstract artist and kind of pattern worker, that was really how it happened. Is I drew a line, and then I was like, oh, well, this line would look cool with it, and then it turns into this really cool kind of design thing, and some really amazing pieces have come out of that. On top of this, there's thought, and therefore something exists thing, I have come to a conclusion, and this one was more religion-based. It was the absolute truth I got from the Bible, and, not everybody has studied or learned from the Bible, so it's not necessarily a lesson that everybody will agree with, and it's certainly not whittled down to the absolute, basic qualities. I can't prove this for sure, but I believe that God is love. So that means that the ultimate consciousness, which is God and kind of comes ahead of us, is a loving entity. And by that I mean that essentially we all have emotions, but we also all agree that there are positive and negative emotions, and that pretty much the height of positive emotion is love. I know that somebody, and I'm probably going to do a video on this as well at some point, but she made a TED Talk about what it is that we all want, and she got thousands and thousands of emails saying essentially the same thing, that everybody wants health, happiness, and love. So that indicates that we all have this internal desire to be happy and to be loved and to love. You know, we all have this desire to be in positive emotion, which means that the ultimate form of expansion, the ultimate form of growth, and the ultimate life can only be lived in love, which would then indicate that God is also a loving entity, that overall consciousness would be a loving entity, because that is something that we all have in common. It's one of the few things that we all share. And I'd say even serial killers and murderers want this as well. It's just they're so far away from it that they don't really recognize what exactly is happiness or love anymore. And I talked about that a little bit in a previous video, so you can go and watch that. I'll possibly leave it in the description for you as well. So with that, we kind of have these two main conclusions that I kind of live from, which is one, God is consciousness, the ultimate form, and that God is love. Now, one of the interesting things about consciousness is we can't be entirely sure which came first, a conscious being on a planet with life that has conscious ability, or consciousness came first and therefore life was created, and the planets and everything like that. It does indicate that thought is essentially energy, and I don't think anybody can really doubt that. It's a non-physical thing, and typically if it's non-physical, we quantify it as energy. E equals mc squared, right? If it's not the speed of light and it's not matter, it's probably energy. And you can debate me on that if you want to, but my thought is that a single thought is kind of like a particle. And if you have many, many thoughts coming together, then it starts to manifest into something physical, making energy into matter. And we do this all the time. I mean, houses were only built because somebody had a thought and then made it physical. Sure, they used physical resources, but the house itself would only exist if somebody thought about it. And the same goes for many other things. I mean, cell phones, computers, all these things, they would not exist if somebody hadn't thought about them. They were once thought, and now they're matter. So if thought is energy and can become matter, it then indicates that there is a certain level of control you get through your thoughts. And since thoughts are the only things we can really prove exist, it makes a lot of sense that a lot of power is going to be in the thoughts. But that does mean that we have to be cautious of our thoughts and our emotions, given that we want positive emotions in our life and not negative necessarily. But the emotions have to therefore be like a subcategory of conscious thought, which means that most of the time your emotions are going to be reacting to your thoughts, whether they be subconscious, unconscious, or conscious thoughts. So your emotional reaction is going to depend on your belief structures and on your thoughts, which then means if you have a negative emotion, it's kind of like a guiding system telling you, yes, that's the right path, or no, that's not the right path. And I've talked a little bit about this as well. That's a concept that is pretty common in the spiritual development community. Teachers like Abraham Hicks and Teal Swan both talk about emotions being like your internal guidance system. And I find that to be absolutely true. And this is where muscle testing can be useful, but I'll do a separate video on that at some point, probably tomorrow. But I will be doing another video on that. So if you use your emotions as your guidance system, it's essentially like telling you how you can make your thoughts come into existence. And I know that I've talked a little bit about how thoughts can become things. Kind of like if you think about the perfect relationship, you're far more likely to get it into your life. And that comes back to the $1 million concept, where who's more likely to get $1 million? Is it the person that believes $1 million is possible and likely, or the person that believes that it's an impossible dream and they'll never achieve it? Obviously, the person who believes it's possible is far more likely to get it. And given that consciousness is essentially the God entity in this universe, it makes a lot of sense. when you think, you're essentially acting like God. And, according to the Bible, we're made in the image and likeness of God, so that makes sense. We are minor versions of the ultimate creator, essentially. And the way that you create is through your thought. My theory of how the universe started, according to this kind of philosophy, is that you have enough thought from a large conscious entity, and that thought is so intense that it eventually starts to manifest into physicality. So, maybe you create dust. And, that doesn't seem like much, but dust combined together, individual particles combined together make up everything. So, it doesn't take much. And we don't know to what extent we can form things. It's possible that you can literally create something out of nothing. I have never mastered that skill. I don't know if I ever will. I don't even know if I'll try. But it is possible from what I understand of the universe. So it could be interesting to experiment with. I do know that there are some ideas out there that there are individuals that can shape stone with their hands, and there are individuals that can teleport objects from one room to another. And if you look at the book Reality Transurfing, thank you Aaron Doughty for that one. That one describes how transformations like that might occur, which is you slowly shift things through dimensional planes. And that's a concept that is probably not going to make a lot of sense to many of you. I do think that science has pretty thoroughly proven that there are more than likely many dimensions. And if you look at simulation theory, which is another concept of how the world works, it makes absolute sense, where we are on Earth, essentially living in a simulation, playing out a particular life role, and we get to choose which life we are actually living in. So you could be living a poverty life and then see yourself as wealthy and then move dimensions into the wealth simulation. It's definitely a challenging concept, and if you have questions on this, definitely leave them in the comments, because I really enjoy thinking about concepts like this, but they are somewhat abstract, and I did my best to explain it, but I have no idea how well you understood what I was saying, or what the case may be. So definitely leave a comment. That is everything I have for the video today, so like, subscribe, share this, so on, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.